don't respond instantly. You should be thoughtful.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, simply say that you don't know. And there's a certain respect that comes from that.
Hi, Ryan. Welcome to Owning Your Legacy podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it, and I love being live. It's special to be humans together, not on a screen. If you don't mind, will you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, happy to. My name is Ryan Smith, and I'm the Executive Vice President at Ajinomoto.
So I wondered if you could start with sharing your story with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story is a bit unique. I've had over 25 years experience within all things food. And it started off as a bagger in a grocery store when I was 15. I distinctly remember my mom coming in and saying, "Here's your orange smock. I got you a job."
Oh, wow.
And so I started my career in food and all things retail and just went along that journey. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I graduated from college with a print journalism degree. And I needed to decide, was I going to stay with retail, which at that time I was with Meijer, and then, or would I go and work in print journalism as a reporter? That stage, that's when really things were changing. I'll date myself. That was in the late 90s. You can tell my gray hair. And I really needed to decide. I didn't want debt coming out of school. And so that took me into an opportunity to grow with Meijer and do all kinds of neat, different leadership. It allowed me the opportunity to fail as a leader at a really young age because I was 21, 22, and these are really large retail footprints. So you're leading teams of 400, 450 people, many of which have a lot more experience than you do.
Wow.
So along the way, you start to engage with your vendors. I got to meet people from the Coca-Cola company, and they said, "We kind of like your style. You seem to know what you're talking about some days." And
when you were at Meijer, were you leading a sales team or?
No, store operations.
Store operations,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So, and then towards the, I should be clear, what I would really do is there would be a challenge in a particular store.
Okay.
So we want you to go to lovely Kokomo, Indiana.
Yeah.
And we're having some challenges. We want you to go there. So
fix it.
And yeah. And so.
And would that sometimes be like personnel challenges?
It could be labor, could be overall store culture. Maybe you walk into a retail setting or you walk into a food service and instantly you can get a vibe for what's going on.
Yeah.
There would be something that just needed to be tweaked, some sort of direction that need to be provided. And then I would move on to a new opportunity.
So, a new problem.
A new problem, yep.
And you were really young then, it sounds like. So
yeah, so I'm not one of these who went, got my MBA or my PhD. So I needed
you did
money.
it by doing, really.
Yeah.
Which is
so at Meijer, I met individuals from the Coca-Cola company, and they said, "Hey, how would you not like to work as many weekends? How would you like to not work as many nights and holidays?" All of that, by the way, wasn't true.
Yeah,
but that was their pitch. And if you're interested, we have these leadership opportunities, and we think you'd be great. The catch is you would have to consider going backwards in terms of your compensation, and we'd want you to start off as a route salesperson. I had never done anything like that, but I'm always up for something new and some sort of challenge. So that was, when I reflect back on the different experiences that I've had, that is something that was one of the more magical times because it was an opportunity to get to know people, an opportunity to do something that I'd never done before, which is selling. And the way that it works is you have multiple times to do that throughout the day. So individuals, I have a whole respect for that. They might make 28 to 32 quote unquote sales calls. And so you always have this opportunity to enhance your communication skills, to connect with people. And quite honestly, maybe prototype those mistakes that you just made. So that was a fun time.
So describe who you were selling to, like how that, so are you going to I'm picturing you going to 7-Eleven or something, or, trying to get Coke in there, but I doubt that's
no,
what
it's
it is.
okay.
Yeah.
So the way that model works, and I think it's still true today, is you start off in what's your really large box retailers, and then you work your way out to the perimeter.
Okay.
And those were the days when you would have a tells on. You would find so that's your order entry machine.
Oh, okay.
You needed to find a payphone because you had a 1-800 number that you needed to hook your tells on into and then upload the order. and you had to upload your order by 2 o'clock each afternoon so the warehouse could begin to build
Yeah.
for the drivers that would be heading out the next morning.
Payphone. Yeah.
So when I tell my kids that, they have no idea what I'm actually
What is a
talking about.
payphone?
Yeah. So all kinds of experiences in terms of engaging with individuals who maybe they lead a really large QSR chain or a quick serve restaurant, or college, university, talking about sideline activation for a sporting event. We want to be your official water supplier. We want to have your sports recovery drink. We want the pouring rights within the campus. To sitting across the desk, someplace like a Kroger, where you're talking to a really large retailer about, okay, this is the way the ad displays would work. So at that point in my career, I had these two different perspectives. I had, this is how you merchandise, and then this is how you engage with the retailer or with the food service, the restaurant. But something at that stage really happened that maybe set me on the path to who I am today. And it was, I had a really close friend / mentor, and he's the reason why I would move around, and he really promoted me in terms of both, here's the things you should work on, here are the things that are your core strengths.
And he was at Coke?
At Coca-Cola,
Okay.
yeah. And so we were heading to a meeting. The meeting was not too far away from here in Niles, and he jumped a Metro track in his company car, and that was it.
Oh,
and
yes.
I thought, okay, so this person, has kids, is, a really great person, but something about, how we are operating right now probably isn't something that I really would like to be a part of moving forward. And you often think that business or leadership is something that's just so critical, so important, that it's almost this life or death thing, especially early on, that you lose a perspective.
Yeah.
And that really helped me with perspective in terms of what is actually important. And so I made a change, and I went into this world that I'm in today that I knew nothing about. I had a colleague that was at Associated British Foods, part of AB Mauri, and he said, I think you should come here. I think you could help us grow. And I said, that's fine, but I don't know anything about science. I was miserable at school, half because I just didn't really care.
Yeah.
But, and so I said, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And so then I went and took all of it. Their business model was around baking. And so I didn't know anything about baking or the science or what was an emulsifier to an enzyme to fill in the blank. So I took a lot of different coursework so that I could learn and realized that this ingredient part of the world, the people who formulate for CPG or they formulate for a restaurant, is actually quite intriguing.
It is.
So
And
that
there's
took me
not
onto
a
this
lot of
path.
awareness for our industry. I feel like we could really work on that.
Yeah.
Because it is a cool industry.
And it's reliable. It might not be where it's the flashy side of different types of industries, but it's something that is consistent.
Right. I mean, even in a
be-
pandemic, in a recession, and it people eat differently during those trying times, but they definitely still have to eat. I agree with you.
Yeah. So I had a great opportunity there. I learned about something that I had never been exposed to before. Or quite honestly, I had never really even thought about it.
Right.
And then I made a transition to Carey. And that's when Carey was purchasing multiple companies throughout the year. And you would walk in and you would engage with a customer and they'd say, that's wonderful. This is great. But who do I call? I have all these individual business cards and I'm not sure, who is this person that I'm supposed to reach out to? And I didn't realize the significance of the opportunity that was provided in terms of the typical leading a P&L, but then actually developing a strategy that could be communicated to investors, could be communicated to customers about how you could bundle what you are putting together, but just have one face of an organization.
So at that point, were you managing the U.S. sales team, or what was your role?
So a combination of emulsifiers and different texturants, all designed really almost the first part was in baking. So then we developed a separate team that would really focus on key bakers and those relationships. Then that expanded to dairy, and then others took that across the P&L to really the business model that exists today. So,
and how long were you at Carey?
So it was Carey's 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it probably is something that people ask me because I make changes, and what what are you looking for, or when do you decide that you're going to make that next step?
Right. Next company.
Next company, next challenge. And for me, this might sound interesting, but I tend to get bored.
Yeah, yeah.
And I need something big. I have to have something big that the team is working on. I love putting together pieces of a leadership puzzle and constructing that, injecting momentum. One of the mantras that we have is that, okay, good news and bad news should travel at the same pace, but you better have fun.
Yeah.
And winning is fun. And sharing and laughing about the mistakes that you made and being transparent, that's also fun. So that was an interesting time towards the end because I thought I was ready for the next leadership opportunities.
Okay.
And the feedback that I was given is, you're too nice. You're too
I've heard
kind.
that once or twice in my life.
You're too kind. And to some degree, perhaps that's something that you should consider in terms of, first impressions are important. But for me, maybe who I am, I like to read a room. I like to be quiet. I like to listen. And that times can conflict with someone's vision for what leadership should be.
That's profound. You got to dig into that a little. There's a lot of stuff you've been saying I want to dig more into.
Please. Yeah.
I think I'd love you to say more on that because sometimes you can hear, I think Brene Brown says it often, kind isn't always kind. It's the direct and the clear communication and feedback that can be hard to give. But I'd love to hear more about quiet people can be amazing leaders. And there's that book, Quiet. I don't know if you've ever read that one, and introverts. And I think I just love to hear more of your thoughts on leadership and the characteristics that you think are so most important.
Yeah. Well, I'll speak to my own experience. And so if I go back and I'm that 21, 20-year-old, 22-year-old person and I'm engaging with a butcher, back then a real butcher, a bandsaw, missing some digits and what that might look like, and saying, well, you should merchandise the product this way. How come the seafood case isn't set up and it's already 8 o'clock in the morning? You need to do it. What I learned is there was too much telling and certainly not enough listening. And one of the things that I always think about is I had a district store manager. I think maybe he looked after 10 or 12 stores. And so you would see this person maybe once a month. And it was routine. You would walk the store, you'd have discussions, you'd have some business meetings, and then they would leave. And on the way out, he said, don't forget how long your shadow is cast. And he left. So I'm 22, and
what does
I go
that
back
mean?
in my office. I'm like,
That's so deep. I love that.
What is he talking about?
Don't forget how long your shadow is cast.
So he comes back in about a month, and a month later. And I said, hey, before we get started, I've been thinking about this. And I was
For a month?
Yeah, and I'm just a little shy to ask you, what did you mean?
Yeah.
And he said, that day you were having a bad day. And I said, yeah, I was. He goes, everyone in this store. And so forget that it was a store. It could be, whatever the work environment is.
Right.
When you're the leader, everyone is watching you, even when you don't realize it.
True.
And that was his message to me, is that you, because you were carrying it all with you, instead of just kind of talking to somebody saying, this happened and what do you think? And having that kind of colleague to colleague discussion, you put probably everybody a bit on edge because you're a friendly person. You smile a lot. People like to talk to you. And the fact that you were having a bad day, everybody picked up on that.
And so everybody's allowed to have a bad day, though.
Yeah.
It sounds like what you're saying with that is sometimes you got to kind of put it aside when you're a leader, or at least not be so.
Or have a support system that you build of.
I love that.
Those people that they trust you and you can trust them. That could be an evolution as well. Days so yesterday we had mini town halls.
And those are exhausting.
Those, you have to be
on
engaged.
All day.
Yes, engaged. And one of the hardest things to do is when somebody brings you a challenge, the easiest thing to do would be to respond with an answer. But maybe that's not the right way to do it. Maybe I was just coaching myself over and over again yesterday because we had a series of 7 times, probably about 30, 35 people in each session.
Whew.
So things come up.
That's at least 7 hours of talking. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
wow.
Lots of missed emails and lots of different things to follow up on. But one of the things
and then you're here today. Thank you.
Is the opportunity to say, don't respond instantly. You should be thoughtful.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, simply say that you don't know. And there's a certain respect that comes from that.
And I think the respect comes in making sure you do answer.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. And to not forget the follow-up. And that's not always easy, especially with that many questions you probably had.
And then to connect, and that probably happens with this nice conversation, combination of perspective and experience, and then others who are willing to coach you on this opportunity to say, okay, well, what is the common theme? The questions could have been different, but what is the common theme? And it wasn't something like, for that particular example, it wasn't that they were talking about, our benefit package or we want more money or anything. That wasn't it.
Right.
The specific request, as I kind of went through my notes and said, okay, this is a pretty common theme, is the provider of the insurance makes it awful challenging to then process claims.
Right.
Which then puts a burden on the employees in terms of how do I manage my cash. Those are things that they're nuances. And whether it was the time at Coca-Cola or the time at Meyer or quite honestly the time at Carrier, was how can you evolve but yet still be core of who you are?
Yeah.
So if somebody puts it in and says, when you walk in a room, nobody knows that you lead a large operation for North America or that you just came back from this random place in Tokyo or fill in the blank. They just, I grew up on a dirt road. And people who know me hate that I say that over and over again.
No, I love that story.
I'm the kind of person who they sent a really small bus to come and get me.
Wow.
Because it took an hour and 20 minutes.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up about 10 minutes outside of Danville, Illinois.
Oh, I know exactly where that is.
So, and that town had gone through a transition. There was a General Motors factory that had shut down and different things changed.
Did you grow up on a farm?
Didn't grow up on a farm, but grew up on a space that my dad built. And he was a factory worker, built the house, constructed it. That's where my 2 sisters and my mom and my dad, that's where we all grew up. So, or at least my sisters.
What do you think of that growing up? Do you bring into your leadership?
Well, when you connect with individuals who they are shift workers, they have all kinds of different things that they're thinking about. It helps me not lose perspective.
Relatable.
So I get to do all kinds of fun things. We have executive chefs. We have fancy dinners. We get really cool things that we get to do. And hopefully many of those are earned. But you can lose your perspective if you don't have some sort of self-reflection or maybe getting back to the core of who you are. So,
and humility.
Yeah.
You seem like you've got a lot of that, and that balance of confidence and humility, I think, is definitely apparent in you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I think it's important. So when somebody says, I didn't know that you were that person. Because
I think that's a compliment.
I've just said, well, I am who I am.
Right.
And then what's interesting is the people that have worked with me, they say, are we talking about the same person? Because he's really intense. He's crazy competitive, but it's just buried low because, we've been really fortunate as teams to have success. And one of the things that is unique is, for whatever reason, maybe they just have had some bad decisions that they've followed, is within our leadership team, there's individuals who we've worked together at 2 different companies. There's individuals that now we've worked together at 3 different companies.
Really? So you're following the same path?
Yeah, and we kind of reconnect.
Does someone bring the other one along? Like, is there?
So it's usually been me.
Usually you bringing someone along, yeah.
Saying, hey, I made this change. Yeah. If you're ever interested, I think you would be a good fit.
Okay, so when you were told at Carrie that you were too kind and that trait was going to hinder you from moving up, is that when you decided to leave Carrie?
That was the time when I decided, maybe it would be a good opportunity to just try something new.
Right.
And so...
I think that the depth of that decision, what I like about that is that you were confident in who you were. And you were like, you know what, I'm not going to change to please a company. You stayed true to yourself.
And that was the hardest decision that I've made in terms of making a change, in terms of you're going to do something different, not with your career, but in terms of, the organization that you're going to lead. It was absolutely the hardest thing to tell the leaders of the organization that I had made a change, because they really supported me, gave me all kinds of
And your
opportunity.
team, I imagine. I imagine that was hard to leave it, the team that you had assembled.
Yeah, it was really hard, because while you can enjoy the opportunity to build teams, it's really hard when you're having fun and you're winning and everybody seems to have that level of trust to say you're going to start over. So I
You
made
probably almost even felt like, I'm assuming, but maybe even like you betrayed them, because I imagine you wooed some people onto the team.
Yep.
And then you're like, now I got to go.
Yeah. So one of the individuals that I work with today, I recruited her back. So it was her second time at that organization. And then
And
say,
she's
I'm
like,
leaving.
great, you recruited me back and now
Yep.
you're leaving. I can
Yep.
only imagine how that conversation went.
But the great news is that we work together again now at Ajinomoto. And so
and your role now is?
I'm the executive vice president who looks after North America for Ajinomoto. I didn't know anything about Ajinomoto. I kind of thought it was a car company, the whole moto thing. And then I soon understood that, okay, it's this $10 billion organization really focused on CPG. And then they have, around the world, they have ingredients that are really focused on, the umami or kokumi or high-intensity sweeteners.
And they came, I think Brenda was telling me that they came up with that fifth
Correct.
taste.
Yep. Umami.
Which is really interesting, umami.
Yep.
And then try to say, I say Ajinomoto, which is wrong, right?
I think you can say it any way you like.
Exactly.
Yep.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yep.
So,
But I met with the leader, Mr. Sato. I had never traveled to Japan. I had traveled internationally, but mostly within South America, within Europe. So it was a new opportunity for me to, basically ease into a discussion. What I mean by that is we met in his office after work 6 times for a couple hours to make sure that there was a fit and that it was mutual.
So you had to fly over to Japan 6 times?
No, here. Here.
Here,
local.
okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
whew.
No.
That's a long recruiting,
It would've
getting to
been.
know each other process.
But it wasn't something, what really helped is it wasn't an opportunity to rush into anything. And that was new to me. This idea that you can be a little more thoughtful, you can still move with pace, you can still move with speed, but it's okay to just have a little bit longer of an approach in your decision making.
Right.
Not too long. You still have to have action. So,
Especially for such a big decision.
well, what I later learned is he had just communicated that they were going to have this new leader of the business and got all of his colleagues in Tokyo and around the world on board with the decision. And then that person left within 2 months.
Oh.
And so just as much as it was a decision for me, it was a really important decision for him. So that way, he still had that respect for the different leaders that he engaged with.
That is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard.
So the common ground that we found was he was a big idea, likes really big challenges. I like big challenges in this mix of, is it a great opportunity for us to move forward, which is kind of like a closed-end yes or no. Can you inject momentum where there isn't? And clearly our business, nobody knew who we were. We were really stagnant. I'd be in P&L meetings and I said, well, the goals that we have set, those are the same goals it looks like that you've had for the last decade.
Oh boy.
And the response was, absolutely. We always meet the number. Like, well, okay, we're going to
But
try.
it's the same number.
We're going to try a new approach. And we built out a staff. We've been having so much fun. We were able to successfully buy a company. Ajinomoto has been operating 110 years in this space, quote unquote, all things ingredients, but never had acquired a company. So that was new for our colleagues and for our teams, and just saying, okay, there are different things that we can do to be put in place to raise our brand awareness,
Right.
but then do a better job of listening to one another about how we can change.
And you were just recently on CBS News, weren't you?
So a colleague of mine was, and that whole project has been about 5 years in the making, which was one of the decision points that you go when you enter into a new opportunity, a new career, because not knowing much about the organization and then trying to find out, okay, well, what do they do? And how would I fit in? And what value might I add to the team? One of the concerns was, well, wait a minute, their flagship of all things umami is MSG.
Yes.
And, my dad was in that Vietnam era. My dad was, somebody who probably needed to watch how much cash you might be spending on different restaurants. And what I quickly learned was, despite the science of all things that this is, approved, the FDA says it's fine, there was a xenophobia around MSG.
Right.
And so we have a great leader, Dr. Tia Raines, who came to the organization to change consumers' perceptions around MSG.
So I remember this vividly because pretty much when I started at Edlong, there was a huge push to get MSG out of all of our flavors. I am a lover of MSG.
Yep.
It is a powerful component. It's nothing quite like it, that's for sure. So tell me about, when did the misconception start and how did it all start?
Yeah. So it really was during that Vietnam era.
Okay.
And in the New England Journal of Science and Medicine, a person writes in and says, I have these symptoms after I eat at a Chinese restaurant.
Yes.
Never mind that MSG is from Japan.
Yeah.
At a Chinese restaurant. And it gets published. And there's a lot of different things within the article or the letter. But the one thing that was then uplifted and just absolutely continued on for decades and decades was MSG. And so much
Almost
so
that people had like allergic reactions to it.
Yep.
And we should say what MSG is for listeners that don't know. It's monosodium glutamate. So it is, right. So back to where you're going, and it's naturally occurring.
Yep, you have it in your mother's milk.
Yes.
It's in Parmesan. Anything that you say, boy, I love eating that, and I should probably put down that bag, it's the sense of umami, the sensation. Yep.
Yeah.
So that all started in the late 60s. So much so that only 2 years ago, Webster's Dictionary still had a definition for Chinese restaurant syndrome.
Really?
And so sometimes you have to be both, have to be active, but then you also have to have this nice, oh boy, that was a nice coincidence. So during the pandemic, there was unfortunately so much Asian hate. And part of what we wanted to do was help people connect the dots. There's nothing wrong. You might not have anything connected to headaches or allergies. It's kind of actually been
So did you
proven.
use the science to?
We complement it, but that's not what we led with.
Okay.
When we sit down with
science doesn't work in persuasion or influence or reality.
What
Often.
the 25 years of experience in all things food has taught me is consumers lie. We all do.
Yeah.
What do you put in your buggy at the supermarket?
Right.
What are those decisions? And it's usually a balance of indulgence, a balance of nutrition, some sort of
taste
lifestyle.
is king.
And taste is always king. The number one repeat purchase intent. So, So we led with more of the xenophobia. And really what that started to help us understand was when we would engage with a young scientist or a young marketeer, they just looked at us like, why are we even talking about that? Like, we get it. Like, this is a great thing to help reduce sodium.
So no worry for them.
For them. But the individuals who within their leadership was saying, no, you can't, was somebody at a leadership level who had already formed an opinion
And grown up
that
with
you
it.
weren't going to change.
Right.
And that's not our strategy, because you develop your personal eating habits between the ages of maybe like 12 through 18. What you eat and what you consume, then that carries on. So it's an individual that you're probably not you can educate, but you're probably not going to change their perception. They're not going to really make some big changes. And then all of a sudden we started to think about trust. And the bridge between trust and xenophobia and MSG was, well, if you're guiding the consumer in terms of all things nutrition with a Whole Foods do not use list, or a clean label, phenomenal, or that is natural, or that is plant-based. All of a sudden, you really are confusing the consumer, because shouldn't you be focused on nutrition and then an path to education on, well, this is what that means on your label.
Right.
Don't be afraid because it's some sort of scientific, that's something that somebody didn't tell me or help me understand.
Right.
Because once you start to erode trust as a leader and a leader within the food industry, all of a sudden you really confuse the consumer of that big food company isn't looking out for me.
So true. And it's so important in our industry, all of us. There's the food science babe who I'm really enjoying. I don't know if you follow her at all. I've never met her or anything, but I love how she is trying to build that trust side up for our industry and kind of demystifying a lot of it that can sound confusing, but she makes it really simple. I think it's great for kids too to listen to that. And there's a phrase lately that I've heard of, like greenwashing. If you've ever heard that one, it kind of feels like it lines up a little bit with what you're saying of, okay, like plant-based. Plant-based is healthy. And then it is to some degree, but then you can go look at a label and there's, tons of sugar or what have you. And I like how you're approaching it, that it's nutrition.
Yeah. One of the things that we want to make sure that we are working on as a team is we connect trust. Hopefully the foundation is transparency. So whether it's these mini town halls that we spoke of earlier, or how do you communicate to a consumer, it's really understanding, what are they looking for? What are they looking for from me as a leader? What are they looking for in terms of a brand, the experience that they might have at food service? And
so
it
that's a
really
great
changes.
point. I love it. So how do you build the trust through transparency with your consumer? Give us some examples of what you do in that regard.
So a really specific example was we had an organization that we serve and a really great relationship say, we're going to formulate your MSG out of this really popular chicken sandwich.
Okay.
So vague but true, but okay.
I'm
following. And then you sit back and you go, okay, now I put my dirt road hat on and go, what is wrong with you? People are standing in line for this product and you say you're going to change it?
Right.
Okay.
And why?
Because our customers are really interested in clean label.
Okay.
And you go, really? The person whose expectation is they go through the drive-through in 18 seconds
and get a chicken sandwich
and
a
they
shake
eat in the
and
car.
French fries.
Yep. Tell me more.
Yes.
And then what you find out is what's been very interesting, whether it's in the retail setting, whether it's a CPG brand, or whether it's a food service, we've lost sight of what the actual customer wants because we really haven't asked them. We know demographics. We know frequency. We know their purchase intent. We know that they still order the number one on the menu, and that's what they order when they come through. But then you have to sit down, and our approach has been, this could be interesting if we say on a consumer side, we're going to do consumer insights, meaning we're going to do a deep dive at a quick serve restaurant in terms of the people who purchased, a fried chicken sandwich, what's important to them. And what came out is value. How much does this thing cost? Coarse taste.
Of course.
How much fat's in it? What is the sodium content? And then just overall calories. Nowhere on that is any particular ingredient. And right now we have a passion for trying to think through and how to educate the individuals who are populating or putting together these do not use lists. Because we really think it's...
Who are they?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to know them too.
It's if we just take a pause back and we say, okay, why don't you, this art of zooming in and zooming out, if you're trying to create a private label experience and you're trying to then say, okay, how do I control share within a retail setting, or how do I have somebody not go to that restaurant but come to see me? You could say, I'm better for you for what I do not have in the product.
Okay.
Which is really kind of a bizarre way. So there are really large retailers who now have 116 do not use ingredients that they say, you will never find that in my brand. So then the consumer, which we all are,
right,
goes, oh, I should drink that beer because I just recently found out that it doesn't have high fructose syrup. You go, well, why are you communicating that? What message are you trying to send? What is the science behind it? And all of a sudden, you really are playing with trust within the consumer, which then you say, well, what are you worried about that in terms of a leader at a large organization for ingredients? It is sending the wrong message in terms of who do you trust.
Right.
And if you, like just as recently as this week, the Edelman Trust Barometer would say more and more employees, people who have a variety of different functions, they trust their employer almost more than anybody now.
Wow.
They certainly don't trust the government or
Right.
anything, and that's not a red or blue. It's just pretty consistent. It is, oh well, my employer, especially during the pandemic, should be doing the right thing, should have my need state top of mind, and you as a leader need to deliver on all these things.
Right.
And if you think about it, if you then say, I'm going to trust that an individual at a really large supermarket chain has a list of ingredients that they're saying they're not going to formulate with, they must have, they must be thinking about me.
Right. So I should trust them.
And I should trust them. But then you go, well, no, why don't we just all focus on the nutrition aspect and how to deliver that best nutrition? Because you're right.
Right.
The plant-based experience is extremely confusing.
It is.
Am I eating it because I want to be a flexitarian?
Right.
Am I eating it because I simply want to invite you over and say, hey, I'm making a plant-based dish. Isn't that cool?
Right.
There's something going on there.
I think the best is when you buy something at Costco or wherever and you stumble on it and you look at it and go, oh, this is awesome. And then you go, this is plant-based? Like I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's the best.
It is. Yep.
And then I keep buying it just because I like it.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
maybe I'm helping the earth a little bit there, but yeah.
There's one thing to say I'm reading a label, but I don't understand what's on the label. There's another thing to say I'm reading a label and I really get in terms of the nutritional values. And so then
Right.
you turn that around and you go, well, holy cow, that fill in the blank that I just enjoyed, that was 40% of the daily amount of sodium that I'm supposed to have.
Right.
So is that really better for me?
I was going to ask you back to your chicken story and your MSG and the insights that no, the consumer really is not saying anything about MSG. If you had to take MSG out of that chicken sandwich, you'd have to add a ton of sodium, correct?
Or you'd add something that was much more costly and
Okay.
really wouldn't do much. And then maybe your sodium is similar, but it's certainly going to go up.
It certainly wouldn't
And then the
taste
cost in the
the
formula is going to go up.
And
Yeah.
ultimately, the taste wouldn't be the same.
Right.
It's impossible to duplicate MSG.
It was founded over 110 years ago, and it's still one of those most powerful ingredients that we have within the industry.
Right.
So, and I would say that,
salt's up there too. I mean, it's really
powerful.
powerful.
Yeah.
And cheap.
Yep.
And duplicating that is not easy either. Yeah. I think there's a lot. This kind of is leading me to a question of us being leaders in the food industry. What do you think that we should be working on? Like, what legacy do we want to leave in this industry? What should we be focusing on in terms of like impact?
There's so many things. And the fun part about it is you have an opportunity to really drive change.
I agree.
So I gave a talk, a keynote speech all around this challenge of do not use less. And saying, as leaders within the organizations, why don't we focus on delivering on nutrition? And if you can do that, you still are going to be able to engage in some sort of new project, some project brief. That should be something that we focus on. The other one is, and I've heard you say it, in terms of, please, it's okay to make mistakes. It's all right to have a growth mindset. Just focus on what you learn from some of those. A really specific example that we have is one of our factories is in Eddyville, Iowa. What's really unique about Eddyville, Iowa is between Cargill and Ajinomoto, there are about 1,000 team members employed there. The population of Eddyville, Iowa is about 1,000.
Wow.
And so you have this interesting thing where everyone knows everyone.
Right. They all work together.
We all work together. We went to high school. We've either worked at Cargill, we've worked at Ajinomoto, and we have a lot of land. We're really fortunate because of the space that we were at. And one of the ideas that got served up at the conclusion of a town hall was, that area that we have that's really close to the Des Moines River, it often floods. And that farmer that we do sharecropping with and what that looks like, they turn that over and they might not be making any money. I think we should put that into place for a wetland mitigation site where we could do something great for the employees. They could have nature walks and trails. We could do something that's really good for the community that we serve and most certainly the environment. And then there's another piece, which is there are some economic benefits in terms of how those credits are managed. And you go, well, why are you talking about that so much? The reason is that was served up 10 years ago and not actioned. So the person that had the role that I had, basically, for whatever reason, we didn't do it. Okay. You have to make a commitment that you're going to not touch that land for 10 years. But it's this idea that if you're building that trust, ideas can be shared. Of course, they're not always going to be actioned.
Right.
But my job is to remove obstacles. My job is to allow others to really grow and develop by taking those risks and to support them.
And innovate, right?
And innovate, yeah. And then we are going to make mistakes. My list of graveyard of bad ideas, I need a new
What's your
spot.
biggest one? Come on, you got to share one.
Yeah.
Or the one you learned the biggest lesson from? Or
maybe the core thing that I think about, and then I'll give you a really good example, is the change management. So I'm thinking of 4 or 5 things at the same time all the time. I don't know if that's good or bad. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's like, hey, make sure you're focused, make sure you're present.
It's the ADHD that I think all of us leaders have.
I've got a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And the piece then is, in the art of change management, if you're looking at a whiteboard, you could be really far on the right, thinking this is where we're going to head. This is what we're going to do. And so this really specific example that I have is we moved into a new customer engagement center. And right when you walk in, we had decided that is going to be a science first. It hits you right in the face. The labs are open. The labs have sunlight. The labs have glass. What I didn't think about was the reaction for some of the team members who had been with the organization for many years, that now they were up front.
And on stage.
Correct. I think the word was used,
Fishbowl.
probably fishbowl.
Fishbowl,
yes.
fishbowl.
Ryan is putting us in this fishbowl. And I didn't
But I get
even
the
think
intention.
in terms
My
of...
people would say, oh my God, Lorette, we'd love more windows. We'd love,
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking. And but we didn't take the time. I didn't take the time to say, no, when we have a new potential customer or we have a relationship that we're trying to foster,
yes,
we are a science-based organization. We stand behind that. And you are the core of what we do. But
beautiful way to say it.
Because as I didn't communicate that properly, they move into their new workstations, their new space, and it's like, no cubicles. You're in the lab. You are the core. You're the engine that makes this place work, along with your partners in manufacturing.
Right.
And it was, wow. And so, what I could have done better was say,
you are the rock stars. We really,
yeah. And because the process of building a new building and all the design work, that was about 2.5 years. So I had plenty of time to sit down
and I think
say,
it's the
this is what it
visual.
would
I
look
mean,
like.
I'm visual. Like,
Yep.
I think if I putting myself in their shoes, it's like you have to see the drawings and to really understand what it's going to feel like to be in there. And,
Right.
and I get it. That's a big change.
And there's all kinds of capital mistakes, and you build this, and whoa, did you really even sell anything? But
oh yeah, the return on investment.
Yeah, we're really fortunate that we work for a company that is really long term.
Right.
I just got back from Tokyo. We're talking about who do we want to be in 2030, and it isn't something that is. It really is true, and we're really thinking that long term, and it's okay to make some mistakes, which is nice.
That you're lucky that you have a company that you can take the long view. I think a lot of companies in our industry, they don't have that luxury that we both have.
Yeah.
That's important. So I think I have just 2 more questions. And one is, I so appreciate your support in Female Strong. That is, it's a labor of love, as you know. So I want to know your why. What about, so first we should probably tell our listeners what Female Strong is. So I'm on the board of this nonprofit organization, and its cornerstone is YAY, which is the Young Entrepreneurial Academy. And it's young women that go through this program. They start a business, and then they launch it at a Shark Tank investor panel thing at the end, which is really fun. We've both been a part of that a couple times. So Ryan is really supporting us and backing us. So I just kind of wanted to hear what lights you up about that program.
It's simple. My daughter.
Yeah,
So
I love that.
yeah. So I mean, she is 10 years old, and when you start to read through the specific data about how at what age she doesn't believe she can accomplish the same things that her brother can accomplish, that's unacceptable. And so we have so many great women within our organization, females who are unbelievable leaders. They teach me about perspective that I don't have, whether it's as simple as the nuances of business travel that I don't even think about.
Like we have to blow dry our hair, and you guys give us 15 minutes before dinner. I totally get it.
or there for sure. Yeah, I didn't think about that one, but thank you. Or the idea that you check into a hotel, and I'm never looking around. You know, I'm never wondering about who's going to get on the elevator. Are they going to slowly follow me to the room? I never think about when I board a plane that people go, well, why are you going on first? Oh, you must be traveling with your significant other. That's how you got your status. You know, all these nuances that all of a sudden they coach me. They go, you should be more perspective, read the room, Ryan. This idea that I go, oh, yeah, you're right. And then also within the industry that we participate in, what we do as leaders is that next generation scientists, there are often times that those are females.
Yes,
And so we need to make sure that we're sharing, that they have mentors, that they understand that there is a path. Sometimes when we're on these sessions and this is the entrepreneur, this is the Shark Tank environment. I remember the recent one that we were on, and the person was in a gymnasium because that's the only place they could get secure Wi-Fi. And they wanted to participate, and then there was a gap, and then there was some problems with the audio. And you could see they were just getting flustered.
Right.
And for us to say, it's okay.
You did a great job.
Pause, start over, let's have some fun.
Yeah.
Because I can't even imagine being of that age and then trying to figure out, how do I do this in front of these intimidating individuals?
Yes.
Because I have an idea. And I just think about my daughter and I go, she needs to understand that there are all these avenues for success. But it's only going to happen when there's multiple visions of what you can do.
Right. It's that if she can't see it, she can't be it concept that we talk about a lot that I love. And it fits too in the young women leadership aspect.
Correct. Yep.
Well, that's great. And I love watching these young girls in Yay, like from the beginning
to the end. It's the
best
day of the year.
Isn't it?
Yep.
We need more investors,
Yeah.
investor panelists. So who's ever listening?
Yeah.
It's every year in March. So yeah. And it really is fulfilling. So I did the CEO roundtable just like a week ago or so, but that was like the first glimpse of the girls. So they all came on and like said their company. It's fun. So then it gets you excited to see what the end is going to be. Yep. And all their ideas, not all, many of them are so purposeful. They really want to give back. Very philanthropic aspect to many of these young women, which I think is so cool because they're going to carry that their whole life.
Yep. And our roles are to show them the how.
Yes.
So many individuals have great ideas. And if we think about the young girl who potentially might be in an inner city environment, trying to find a safe spot, access to Wi-Fi, how do I communicate this? The ideas, that probably isn't that hard.
Right.
They probably are really creative in thinking of something that is really interesting and, to your point, often give back to the communities in which they live. It's a need state they're trying to address, but they don't know the how. For instance, last year we were talking and the person didn't have a laptop or might not know how to write a business plan or might need help in terms of, I didn't think about that would be the way to have that startup money to move on, and how small or how big, what does that look like? And through learned experiences, we have so many individuals that they could tap into.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at math. And I never tell that in front of people because they're like, wait a minute, you're in charge of a lot of money.
I'm terrible at math. That's why we have lovely CFOs that help us with that.
But the reality is you build your support staff with all the people who can complement you.
Absolutely.
And those young women need access to them so they could understand how to realize their dream.
Right. And know what they shine at. I think that's huge. And even their presentation skills, helping them
Yeah.
with their pitch and just getting more and more confident with it. And yeah, it's outstanding. It's a great program. So
It is.
just wanted
Thank
to
you
make
for
sure I said
introducing me
that.
to it. Yeah.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. What is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
The legacy that I'd like to leave behind is the team members embracing risk through a growth mindset.
Ooh, I
So
love that.
if you look back and whether it's different experiences that you've had, even if it's at the same organization, you've had different experiences and you've learned a lot. How do you connect that back to that was a key milestone that we were part of as a team? And then you go back and you go, oh, isn't it amazing that that person has gone on to do just amazing things? Isn't it interesting how that company was one way, and after a few years, the organization really changed.
The culture.
The culture, the identity, what it means to have purpose, building all that in. And if somebody said, that person could be a change agent, has a lot of fun. It's kind of silly sometimes, but has a really high standard in terms of what success looks like. I'd be okay with that.
And is very kind.
And isn't too bad at being nice.
Yeah. I love that. We kind of usually end on that, but there was one thing else that I wanted to touch on. When you were talking about your mentor, I want to hear more about that. So you were on your way to a meeting that you were both going to be at? Is that? And then he got hit by a train. And I just want to hear more about how he affected your life and, what mentorship he gave you that still sticks with you. And
So we probably had some shared values, a common foundation. He started his career at Coca-Cola driving a truck.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, he's in charge of a whole bunch of stuff.
I love
so
that.
he had this nice balance of having a great perspective on leadership, huge responsibilities, but never kind of forgot. I started with a CDL license on a truck, which is a really hard job, especially in a really busy area and making all the stops that you have to have. But what he helped me with is this balance, the balance between wanting to win, but doing it the right way, doing it with a team approach. I really, early in my career, I wasn't very good at understanding how the colleagues, even if they are across on an org chart or top to bottom, it doesn't really matter that you're just a team. And sometimes you have different roles. And what he really helped me with was understanding that if you tap in to that and you listen and you slow down, I was miserable at slowing down. I moved way too fast. And how can you actually listen?
If you're moving too fast,
you miss so much. Good or bad, probably, a mixed. What he really helped me with was understanding the organization that you're part of. It should probably match what's important to you, the culture.
Yeah,
And
the values.
And what that has helped me with is this idea that you can, whether it's something you inherit or something that you're building, you're leaving some sort of imprint on that. And that is a reflection of who you are as a leader and the teams that you're building. So it's this idea that maybe it's part of the legacy question about if you were to walk into our customer engagement center or you walk into any of our factories, we hopefully have some shared values. We hopefully treat each other and we are empathetic, hopefully a little bit of kindness and caring, which is really interesting. Whenever you're interviewing someone, they say, tell me about your company culture. And I always respond, it's horrible. And then they look at me and I'm like, no, I'm just kidding. But hopefully what we have is a high standard. We are learning how to think big, still challenging each other. Well, okay, Ryan, that's an interesting idea, but I have a different way to, kind of view that. Are you sure that's a good idea? And then this idea that we're building trust through a really great foundation of transparency. One of my pet peeves is I shouldn't be walking into a situation and somebody says, I didn't know that. When somebody says, I didn't know that, I'm not doing my job. They might not like what I have to say. We might not be on the same page, but the idea that gray space, and I think that comes with some experience, but also feeling comfortable with who you are. Sometimes you have to make a decision.
Right.
And making a decision is just as valuable as making a good or bad decision.
Right.
But moving on. And our teams that you build and the teams that you support, they really expect that of you. And sometimes it's fun, and sometimes you need a cocktail at the end of the night.
Yeah, that's true. And they kind of just want to understand why I think that we make those decisions. But it's, as you're talking about that, we can't over communicate.
No. In multiple platforms.
Yes, and multiple times.
Yep.
That you feel like, I said that. I swear I know I did. But we have to remember to keep doing it. That your journalism background probably helps with that.
It helps me with asking questions.
Yeah.
So those that have worked with me, and like I mentioned, there's some that have followed 3 times, 2 times, doesn't really matter.
It does matter. That is a huge validation that you are a great leader when people come with you. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. One of the fun games we play is that an open or a closed-ended question? So I see you on Monday, and I say, Laurette, did you have a nice weekend?
Closed.
You go,
yes.
Yes, no. What in the heck did I learn from that? I didn't learn anything. If I ask you, Laurette, what'd you do this weekend? You got to tell me something.
Right.
I mean, you might make it up, you might do whatever. But, as we engage with one another, or the art of tell me more.
Yeah.
Why do you feel that way? That's interesting. Can you build on it?
Or help me understand.
That's right. And then as that starts to spread, hopefully we become better listeners. And if we're better at actively listening, then we can deliver what the individual's really trying to tell us.
Right.
So,
do you have any tricks of keeping track of, I used to be way better at this, of putting notes under like context to remember, like, because there's so many people that we meet every day, or especially yesterday when you were talking about your town hall, that you probably learned something about some people. And do you have any tricks that you do?
Yeah. So I have a lot of different tricks. the one thing is, I'm fortunate, good or bad, my memory is really strong.
That's
and so,
very fortunate.
And so sometimes it's because I never forget anything.
Yeah.
So sometimes I should let go and go, all right, that's enough. You've talked about that for about 12 years. You can move on. Yeah. But I have a yellow legal pad, and I get teased about it all the time. And I take notes that are absolutely, I'm sure somebody looks at it and goes, what in the world? This makes no sense. But I'll do little diagrams. I'll make connections. If on a business card, I'll make some sort of weird connection that makes sense for me, but might not make sense for anybody else. Yesterday, when everybody's wearing hard hats and kind of hard to hear one another, after somebody would ask a question, a tip that I would pass on is I say, oh, that's really great. Repeat the question, and they go, hey, can you just remind me what's your name and how can you share? Because you do have all these different people that you meet, and then make a connection down in terms of the common themes. So at the end of yesterday, I'm back on the airplane, writing down, here's all the notes that you gather throughout the day. There must be connections, and not to try to force things that shouldn't fit, but what are the outliers? What are things that are important? And what are things that are not?
And low-hanging fruit.
Yep. And also equally important, there always are going to be someone in the room who is really looking for that opportunity to take over that session.
Yeah.
And, okay, ask a couple of questions and you go, Ryan, that's really wonderful. Let's move on so someone else can have an opportunity to share what they're thinking as well. Just this nice kind of bridge in terms of I heard you, but you don't get to talk for the whole 60 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
We found when we do our all-company forums, well, during COVID, we obviously all went virtual, and we used to do them at Edlong. And then one of the benefits of the virtual is, because when you were saying that, I'm like, oh, I love it when my people will just talk, like that guy's brave. But now they type in the chat, and there's way more engagement amongst each other. That's really kind of funny sometimes, like teasing each other and stuff. But that's been a really good part of COVID that we appreciate their engagement more. It
gets back to leaders and leaders understanding in terms of what's the right way and the platforms to communicate.
And there's so many. That's also feedback we got is there's too many. You've got LinkedIn, Salesforce, email, Paylocity. It's like there's just too much noise. We got to figure out how to
Yep.
streamline that.
We've had team members who say, "Oh, well, I don't check email. Just text me." We've had all these different.
You have to check your email. Somebody's got to check your email.
You just think through. Okay, well, there's different platforms that make sense for everyone, and unfortunately, when somebody says, especially now, boy, I just want things to get back to normal. As leaders, it's okay to say, this is the new normal.
Yeah.
And we have to think through the right way to get engagement and get that feedback. So.
Absolutely. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Ryan. I really loved our conversation and got a lot of wisdom there.
Thanks for having me, Laura.
Of course. Thanks for being here.